In a quiet Georgia town where nothing ever happens, a fisherman reels in more than he bargained for, a human torso wrapped in plastic. Within days, more body parts surface across the state. The victim is hard to identify, and even harder to piece together. The trail leads to an ex-military husband with a spotless record, a wife who vanished without a trace, and a marriage that hid more secrets than love. No witnesses, no confession, just blood, bone, and a chainsaw. The killer was closer than anyone imagined. This is not just a murder, it's a dissection of the American dream. The early morning sun cast long shadows over Lake Hartwell, a sprawling reservoir that separates Georgia from South Carolina. For most locals, it was a place for bass fishing, weekend barbecues, and quiet moments by the water. But for Joe Whitaker, a retired Army mechanic and lifelong fisherman, July 3rd started with something far from peaceful. He cast his line near the Highway 29 bridge, same as he had every Saturday for 20 years. But this time, his lure snagged on something heavy, too heavy for a fish, too awkward for driftwood. He reeled it in slowly, the nylon line groaning under the weight. What surfaced would haunt him forever. A blue plastic tarp, duct-taped and waterlogged, bobbed to the surface. Joe swore under his breath, thinking it might be dumped construction debris. He leaned over, snagged it with a gaff, and heaved. The bundle tore open at the edge, revealing pale flesh. A single arm, severed, bent at an unnatural angle. Joe dropped the gaff. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, staggering backward as the bile rose in his throat. He scrambled for his phone with trembling hands. Dialing 911. "Dispatcher. Hart County 911. What's your emergency?" "Joe. I found I think it's a body. A part of one. A human arm." Within 30 minutes, sheriff's deputies, EMS, and the GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, descended on the lake. The bundle was removed carefully, with crime scene tape fluttering in the breeze. GBI Special Agent Natalie Ruiz was the first to inspect it closely. Mid-30s, sharp-eyed, with combat boots still dusted from another case up in Jackson County. Ruiz knelt beside the body part. "This isn't an accident," she said quietly. "This is precision." The arm had been severed just above the elbow. Cleanly, too clean for an animal, or even a boat propeller. The skin had started to soften from the water, but ligature marks around the wrist were still visible. Someone had tied this person up, before or after death was still unknown. Agent Ruiz stood up and looked across the lake. "If this is one part," she said, "there are more." Divers were dispatched by noon. By 3 p.m., they had located a second tarp, this one wrapped around a torso. No head, no legs, just a torso with bruising on the ribs and clear signs of postmortem dismemberment. A jagged break near the spine. The cuts were careful, surgical. Whoever did this knew how to carve a body. Dr. Marcus Holloway, forensic pathologist with the Georgia State Crime Lab, received the remains that night. He had performed over 8,000 autopsies. Still, this case was different. "The lack of decomposition tells me the body was dumped recently," he recorded in his notes. "Likely within the last 5 to 7 days. The victim appears to be female, mid to late 30s, Caucasian. Heavy bruising to the sternum suggests blunt force trauma. Cause of death pending." As news spread, GBI tip lines exploded. One call stood out. A woman named Grace Turner reported her sister, Rachel Turner, missing. Rachel, a 37-year-old nurse from Athens, Georgia, hadn't been seen since June 28. Her husband, Carter Turner, said she ran off after an argument. He hadn't reported her missing. Agent Ruiz paid him a visit. Carter Turner answered the door like nothing was wrong. "Can I help you?" he asked. Polite but guarded. Agent Natalie Ruiz held up her badge. "Special Agent Ruiz, GBI. Mind if I come in?" Carter stepped back. "Sure. Is this about Rachel?" The house was neat, too neat. A single-story ranch home in suburban Athens, Georgia. The smell of lemon cleaner lingered in the air. Framed photos of Rachel and Carter, smiling on vacation, hugging in the backyard, lined the fireplace mantel. But none newer than 2 years ago. "Your sister-in-law called us," Ruiz said, walking slowly through the living room. "She said Rachel's been missing for 5 days. You didn't think to report it? Carter exhaled, slow and theatrical. She left. That's what she does. When she gets mad, she runs off. Always comes back. Where did she go this time? I don't know, he said, rubbing his temples. She took some cash, a few clothes, her old passport, said she needed air. Ruiz studied his face. Carter was 42, a high school football coach. Tall and fit, former Marine, according to his background check. But his eyes were tired. Not sad, just rehearsed. Mind if I take a look around? Ruiz asked casually. I'd rather you didn't without a warrant. That was the first red flag. People with nothing to hide rarely say no. Back at her car, Ruiz called in for a warrant to search the property, citing possible involvement in Rachel's disappearance. Then she contacted Grace Turner. She'd never just leave. Grace insisted over the phone. Rachel wouldn't do that, not without telling me, not without her phone, and not leaving her son. That hit Ruiz hard. Son? Eli. He's 8. She would die before she left him. The boy, Ruiz learned, was staying with Rachel's mother in Macon. Carter told them it was just for a few days, while Rachel sorted things out. That night, Ruiz reviewed the 911 call logs and found nothing from Carter Turner. No domestic disputes, no missing person reports, nothing. She subpoenaed Rachel's phone records. Her last call was to her sister Grace, around 9:12 p.m. on June 28. The transcript was chilling. Grace. Rachel, you okay? Rachel. He's yelling again. I locked the door. Grace. Do you want me to come over? Rachel. If I don't call you tomorrow, something's wrong. She never called again. On July 4th, the search warrant was approved. At 6:15 a.m., Ruiz and 2 GBI agents returned to the Turner residence. Carter wasn't home, according to his work calendar. He had taken the week off, but neighbors hadn't seen his car since Tuesday. In the garage, forensic officers found small specks of dried blood along the baseboard, nearly invisible to the naked eye. Under UV light, the concrete lit up in long, streaked swaths, cleaned, bleached, but not perfectly. Inside the laundry room, agents opened the washing machine. A bath towel, soaked, still faintly stained with blood, and tangled inside, long blonde strands of hair. Ruiz stared down at it in silence. Then the tech called out from the crawl space under the house. Agent Ruiz, you're gonna want to see this. They found a hacksaw, wrapped in a freezer bag, tucked behind the HVAC ducting. The blade was caked with something dried and dark. And it was painted, a distinct metallic blue. Just like the bone fragment pulled from the severed arm. The hacksaw was delivered to the Georgia State Crime Lab before sunset. Forensic analyst Jamie Lawton, a quiet perfectionist with a background in metallurgical engineering, logged the evidence and examined the blade under a stereo microscope. The serration pattern, distinct, angled teeth with micro-pitting, matched the cut marks found on the humerus and femur of the dismembered body parts retrieved from Lake Hartwell. Then came the clincher. Smears of blood embedded deep between the blade's teeth. Lawton ran a preliminary swab, positive for human blood. It would take time to process DNA, but Agent Ruiz already knew what they'd find. Still, protocol mattered. She needed that match. She needed Rachel's DNA. Ruiz returned to Rachel's mother's home in Macon. Eli, Rachel's son, was outside, chasing fireflies with a jar and a grin. It broke Ruiz's heart. Inside, Rachel's mother, Beverly, handed over a soft bristle hairbrush and an old toothbrush from Rachel's travel kit. Tears in her eyes, she asked only one thing. Please, find her. By July 6th, the DNA results confirmed it. The blood on the hacksaw belonged to Rachel Turner. The torso, the severed arm, the forensic puzzle was beginning to assemble itself into a portrait of murder. But what kind of man kills his wife, saws her apart, and drops her into a lake, then keeps living like nothing happened? Ruiz dove deeper into Carter Turner's life. He was decorated in the Marines, 2 tours in Afghanistan. After his honorable discharge, he became a coach at Athens Regional High, known for his discipline, respected, tough but fair. But there were whispers. A complaint from a fellow coach about aggressive behavior at a team banquet, dismissed. A student's mother who claimed Carter had cornered her in the parking lot during a late-night pickup, no charges. Rachel had filed for divorce once, in 2018, but later withdrew. The petition mentioned verbal abuse and controlling behavior. Ruiz followed that thread. She spoke with Rachel's former coworker at Piedmont Athens Medical Center. She always covered the bruises. The nurse said, blamed it on bumping into carts. But once, I saw her cry in the med closet. Said he threatened to take Eli if she left. Back at the Turner house, forensic techs drained the septic tank. It was a long shot, but they found something. A partially dissolved piece of paper, protected inside a plastic baggie. A torn notebook page, scrawled in blue pen, barely legible. Ruiz held it with gloved hands and read. If something happens to me, look in the garage. He always locks it. He's hiding something. It was signed, R.T. Rachel Turner had left a clue, one final scream before silence. The challenge now was catching Carter before he vanished for good. And the first place Ruiz checked was Lake Hartwell. On July 7th, the heat hovered around 97 degrees as Agent Ruiz stood once again on the banks of Lake Hartwell. But this time, the area was sealed off. Crime scene tape danced in the hot breeze. Divers from the GBI's underwater recovery team were back in the water, not for a search this time, but a sweep. They were looking for the rest of Rachel Turner. At least 2 body parts were still unaccounted for, her head and left leg. Without them, Ruiz feared the defense could argue reasonable doubt. And worse, Rachel's family wouldn't have closure. Dr. Holloway, the forensic pathologist, walked the shoreline with Ruiz, his khakis soaked with sweat. You think the head's out there? She asked. He nodded grimly. If he followed the same disposal pattern, it could have sunk, or snagged on something. Ruiz stared out across the water. He wanted her to vanish. Piece by piece. He didn't just want her gone, he wanted control of how she disappeared. For hours, the divers searched through thick aquatic vegetation and silty bottoms. Then, just after 3 p.m., one of them surfaced, raising a gloved fist. In it, tangled with lake weed and wrapped in cloth, was a human foot. The partial remains were lifted gently into a body bag and sent to the crime lab. Analysis later confirmed it matched the DNA of the recovered torso and arm. More importantly, the same hacksaw striations were found on the tibia. The same killer, the same tool, the same plan. Ruiz returned to headquarters in Atlanta and called the DA's office. We need to issue a bolo, she said. Carter's on the move. Earlier that morning, his neighbor had spotted Carter packing boxes into his truck. We thought he was just going camping. The man had said, he loves the mountains, always talks about Blue Ridge. Agent Ruiz's stomach turned. If he disappeared into the Appalachian foothills, they might never see him again. She ran his credit card activity. The last charge. A gas station in Ellijay, Georgia, right on the edge of Chattahoochee National Forest. Ruiz made the call. Within 45 minutes, state troopers were stationed on all roads leading out of the region. Carter's face was faxed to every ranger station and local patrol unit within 150 miles. But Ruiz had a hunch. Instead of running into the forest, Carter was circling back. Sure enough, surveillance footage from a hardware store in Commerce, Georgia, dated that same morning, showed him in a baseball cap and sunglasses, purchasing a 5-gallon gas can, bleach, gloves, and a tarp. Ruiz stared at the still image. He wasn't running, he was prepping. The question was, for what? That night, Carter Turner's phone pinged a cell tower near Monroe, Georgia, 40 miles south. Ruiz issued a silent alert. The next 12 hours would be critical. And by morning, Carter would resurface, somewhere no one expected. By dawn on July 8th, Carter Turner was back on the radar. He pulled into the parking lot of Mount Zion Baptist Church just outside of Monroe, Georgia, a place where he and Rachel had once attended marriage counseling. He sat inside his Ford F-150 for nearly an hour. Just parked, engine running, windows up. A local church volunteer noticed him and called it in. There's a man out here, she told 911. He's been sitting in his truck a long time. He looks off. Agent Ruiz got the call at 6:13 a.m. She didn't wait. With a GBI field unit 10 minutes out and a Monroe County deputy already en route, she jumped into her car and drove straight there. By the time she arrived, Carter was gone. But the volunteer had taken a photo, a grainy shot of Carter walking into the woods behind the church with a red gas can and a large duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Was he armed? Ruiz asked. I didn't see a weapon, the woman said, but he was walking like he was saying goodbye to something. Ruiz and the responding units fanned out behind the church. At 7:06 a.m., they spotted smoke. It curled lazily from a small clearing about 200 yards into the trees. Carter had started a fire, a shallow pit dug into the earth. Smoldering. Next to it, a pile of half-burned documents, a melted phone, and something else, a duffel bag partially zipped, soaked with what smelled like gasoline. Ruiz approached, hand on her holstered sidearm. Carter Turner, she called out. This is Special Agent Ruiz with the GBI. Step out slowly, hands where I can see them. For a few seconds, nothing. Then Carter emerged from the trees, his face streaked with sweat and ash. He raised his hands, calm, composed. I was just saying goodbye, he said softly. You found her, didn't you? Ruiz didn't answer. She simply ordered the cuffs. Inside the duffel, Rachel's missing wallet, her wedding ring, and her passport. But there was something else too, a handwritten journal, spiral bound, the cover singed at the corners but mostly intact. Ruiz flipped it open. The first page read, If I die, it's because I stayed too long, and because I believed I could fix what was already broken. The handwriting matched the note in the garage. Rachel had kept a log. Daily entries, fights, threats, Carter's moods, his manipulation, his violence. One passage in particular stood out, dated 5 days before she vanished. He said I was lucky Eli was still mine. Said if I left again, I'd never see him. I'm scared he means it this time. He watches me sleep. That journal would become Exhibit A. But Ruiz wasn't finished. Where's the head, Carter? She asked during interrogation later that day. He stared at the wall. I didn't mean to kill her, he whispered. I just wanted her to stop screaming. The confession was partial, incomplete, but it was enough. Combined with the DNA, the hacksaw, the blood evidence, and the journal, the DA had everything they needed. Carter Turner was charged with first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, obstruction, and child endangerment. But even in custody, Carter never revealed one thing: where he put Rachel's head. And to this day, it remains missing. Carter Turner sat in a steel chair, wrists chained to the table. As the GBI's interview room clock ticked past midnight, Agent Ruiz leaned in. Her voice was calm, even. You dismembered your wife, Carter. We've recovered most of her remains. We have the saw, the blood, the DNA, the journal, the confession. The only thing you haven't given us is the truth. Carter remained silent, eyes fixed on the scratched-up metal tabletop. Ruiz dropped a photo in front of him, a close-up of Rachel's foot. Recovered from Lake Hartwell, the toenails painted blue, faint tan line where her wedding ring had once been. I'm not here for a deal, Ruiz said. I'm here because your son deserves to know where his mother is. All of her. That hit him. For a second, his lips parted, his eyes welled. But then, nothing. The wall was back up. Ruiz left the room. Let him sit, she told the deputy. Let the guilt do the work. Back at the crime lab, Dr. Marcus Holloway was finishing his final report. The cause of death, finally confirmed. A single gunshot wound to the chest, consistent with a .40 caliber round, the same round used in Carter's service pistol. Though the gun had never been recovered. The medical examiner also noted the order of dismemberment: arms, legs, torso, head last, suggested by the absence of postmortem pooling in the surrounding tissue. Rachel had been stored cold, possibly in a freezer, before being dismembered. Then dumped, piece by piece, into the lake. The level of organization here, Dr. Holloway noted, indicates not just panic, but planning. Rage can be sloppy. This wasn't sloppy. Meanwhile, Ruiz built a timeline. June 28, 9 p.m. Rachel calls her sister. Scared, locked in the bedroom. Between 9:30 to 10 p.m. Rachel is killed. Overnight. Body is stored, most likely in the chest freezer in the Turner garage, which had since been disposed of. June 30th. Carter purchases a tarp, gloves, and cleaning chemicals at a local Home Depot. July 1 to 2. Rachel's body is dismembered and driven out to Lake Hartwell. July 3. Fisherman discovers the first body part, the arm. July 8. Carter is arrested. On July 15, the GBI executed a final search of Carter Turner's online cloud storage. Inside an encrypted folder labeled Tide_logs, buried beneath spreadsheets and empty files, was a single, chilling video file, timestamped June 29, 2:04 a.m. It showed Carter, shirtless, in the garage, adjusting a phone camera before walking into frame with rubber gloves and a handsaw. The angle was tilted, the light harsh. There was no sound, only footage of him wrapping Rachel's limbs in plastic, taping the bundles methodically. He wasn't panicked. He was precise, cold, focused. The video was cut off after 7 minutes. But it was more than enough. In the eyes of the jury, it would seal his fate. The trial of Carter Turner began on October 9, 2024, inside the Clark County Courthouse. National news had picked up the story. Networks dubbed it the Lake Hartwell dismemberment case. The courtroom was packed. Journalists scribbled. True crime podcasters whispered into handheld mics. Rachel's family sat in the second row. Eli between his grandmother and aunt, clutching a photo of his mother in happier times. Carter Turner pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. His defense argued that Rachel's death was a case of self-defense. That she came at him with a knife. That he snapped. But the prosecution had a story Carter couldn't erase, no matter how many bleach stains covered the garage floor. They showed the jury the journal entries where Rachel documented the abuse, the DNA evidence tying her remains to blood found in the car trunk and garage, the forensic testimony on the hacksaw marks, with paint chips matching the exact saw found under his crawlspace, the video file recovered from Carter's cloud account, silent footage of the dismemberment process in action. The court gasped, but the moment that truly shattered the room came when Eli, under closed testimony, was asked by the judge if he remembered the night of June 28. He nodded, softly, then said, "I heard Mommy crying in the garage. Then it got quiet. Then I saw Daddy washing his hands for a long time." The courtroom sat in stunned silence. On November 2, after 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty on all counts. Carter Turner was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In her statement to the court, Rachel's sister Grace read from one of Rachel's final journal entries. "I want to believe I'm still worth saving. Even if no one sees it, I'm still here, somewhere." Grace paused, then looked straight at Carter. "You didn't erase her. You just showed the world who she really was, strong enough to speak even after death." Today, the shoreline of Lake Hartwell near the Highway 29 bridge bears a plaque. It reads, "In memory of Rachel Turner, a mother, a sister, a fighter. Your story was not lost. It was found." Agent Natalie Ruiz still keeps Rachel's journal on her shelf, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. "Sometimes the victim tells the story," she said in a later interview. "Even if it's in pieces, we put them back together. And to the ones who think they've buried their secrets in silence, Ruiz has a message. We hear them, and we're coming."